Chapter 5, The Feedlot, Turning Corn into Meat, page 59. City of Cows. I was speeding down a ramrod straight road in Finney County, Kansas, when the empty, dull, tan prairie suddenly turned black. The gently rolling sea of grass became a grid of steel fences as far as the eye could see. In Kansas, that is really far. I had made it to my destination, Pokey Feeders, a feedlot and home to 37,000 head of cattle. The feedlot appeared suddenly, but the stench of the place had been rising for more than a mile. I soon learned why. At first, I thought the cattle were standing or lying in a grayish mud. Then it dawned on me. That wasn't mud at all. It was manure. An endless series of cattle pens stretched to the horizon, each one home to 100 or so animals. The cattle pens, filled with animals and their waste, are built around a corn mill. 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, the mill noisily turns America's river of corn into cattle feed. I traveled to Pokey early one January with the crazy idea of visiting a particular resident. I was looking for a young black steer with 3 white blazes on his face. The same one I'd met the previous fall on a ranch in South Dakota, 500 miles due north of here. In fact, the steer belonged to me. I'd purchased him as an 8-month-old calf from the Blair Ranch for $598. I was paying Pokey Feeders $1.60 a day for his room and board, all the corn he could eat. My idea was to follow my steer as he traveled through the meat-making branch of the industrial food chain, and so I had followed him here. CAFO Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation, page 61. The old-fashioned way of raising cattle, like the old-fashioned way of growing corn, was on the small family farm. Cattle were raised in pastures, eating grass and hay, the food they naturally eat. But as corn took over the family farm, cows and other animals were pushed out. Cattle are now raised in densely packed animal cities like Pokies. These places are called CAFOs, Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. Farmers gave up raising cattle because, as strange as it might seem, it costs a farmer more to feed corn than it costs a CAFO to buy it, thanks to those government subsidies. Eating meat used to be a special occasion in most American homes. Thanks to CAFOs, meat is now so cheap that many of us eat it 3 times a day. Of course, the American taxpayers have already paid part of the cost by subsidizing corn. But there are other costs involved in raising cattle that way, costs that shoppers don't see when they buy a steak at the supermarket. On the old-fashioned farm, there is really no such thing as waste. Animal manure goes back into the fields as fertilizer, but the waste from CAFOs is a huge source of very toxic pollution. Tons of animal manure are produced with no good way of disposing it. The feedlots are also breeding grounds for new and deadly bacteria. Some of these bacteria are finding their way into our food. And there is another cost to raising cattle on CAFOs, one that's even harder to see. These animals have evolved to eat grass, but in a CAFO, they are forced to eat corn at considerable cost to their health, to the health of the land, and ultimately to the health of us, their eaters. Steer number 534, page 62. I first met steer number 534 on the Blair Ranch, 5,500 acres of rolling short grass prairie a few miles outside Sturgis, South Dakota. In that part of the prairie, you can still make out ruts dug by stagecoaches and cattle drivers of the 1800s. In November, when I visited, the ground was covered with a thick coat of yellow and gold grass. Sprinkled across the fields were moving black dots, Angus cows and calves grazing. Ed and Rich Blair run what's called a cow-calf operation. Their business is the first stage in the production of a hamburger. It is also the stage least changed by the modern industrial food chain. Beef cattle still get born on thousands of independently owned ranches like theirs. Steer number 534 spent his first 6 months in these pastures, alongside his mother, a cow named 9534. The number means she was the 34th cow born in 1995. His mother never met a father never met his father, an Angus by the name of Gar Precision, 1680. Like all beef cattle, 534 is the product of artificial insemination. Born on March 13, 2001, in the birthing shed across from the road, 534 and his mother were turned out to pasture just as soon as the 80-pound calf could stand up. Within a few weeks, the calf began adding to his diet of mother's milk. He chose from a salad bar of grasses: western wheatgrass, little blue stem buffalo grass, green needlegrass. Apart from the Saturday in April, when he was branded and castrated, one could imagine 534 looking back on those 6 months as the good old days. No one can really know what a cow feels, but we can say with confidence that a calf grazing on grass is doing what he was supremely well suited to do. Yet after a few months at Pokey's, my steer will never have the opportunity to eat green grass again. Cows and grass, a partnership. Page 63. Cows have evolved over millions of years to eat grass. It's not a one-sided deal. At the same time, grasses have evolved over millions of years to be eaten by cows. This partnership is one of nature's wonders. When a cow eats grass, it doesn't kill the plant. Grasses have evolved so that they can survive being eaten very well, as long as the cows give them a chance to recover. In return for being chewed on, the plants get help from the cows. The cow protects the grass habitat by eating young trees and shrubs that might compete with grasses. The animal also spreads grass seeds, plants it with his hooves, and then fertilizes it with his manure. Only certain animals, including cows, sheep, goats, and bison, can make a meal out of grass. They can do this because they have a specialized second stomach called a rumen. That's why these animals are called ruminants. The rumen is like a 25-gallon fermentation tank. Here is where the cow gets some help. Inside that tank lives a type of bacteria that dines on grass. The bacteria break down the cell walls of the grass and allows the cows to get at the protein and carbohydrates within. On the plains of the American West, where steer 534 was born, bison and the prairie grasses lived together in partnership for thousands of years. I guess we should include the bacteria in that partnership also. It was a natural solar-powered loop. The plants used the sun's energy to make food. The bison, with the help of bacteria, ate the grass and in return planted it, fertilized it, and defended its territory. It was a successful ecological system. A rumen has evolved into the perfect organ for digesting grass, but it is not good at digesting corn. So then, why is steer number 534 forced to eat corn instead of grass? The answer is one word: speed. Cattle raised on grass simply take longer to grow than cattle raised on corn. In my grandfather's time, cows were 4 or 5 years old at slaughter. Rich Blair explained to me, in the 50s, when my father was ranching, it was 2 or 3 years old. Now we get there at 14 to 16 months. What gets a steer from 80 to 1,100 pounds in 14 months is tremendous amounts of corn, food supplements, and drugs. Fast food, indeed. Cow chow, page 65. In October, 2 weeks before I made his acquaintance, steer number 534 was weaned from his mother. Weaning is the hardest time on a ranch for animals and ranchers alike. Cows separated from their calves will moke and bellow for days. The calves are prone to getting sick. Calves are weaned for a couple of reasons. First, it frees their mothers to have more calves. Second, it gets the calves, now 500 or 600 pounds, ready for life on the feedlot. The calves are rounded up and herded into a backgrounding pen. They will spend a couple of months there before boarding the truck for pokey feeders. Think of backgrounding as a training school for feedlot life. The animals are, for the first time in their lives, confined to a pen. They are bunk broken, taught to eat from a trough, and they must gradually get used to eating what is for them a new and unnatural diet. Here is where they first eat corn. It was in the backgrounding pen that I first met 534. Rather, it's where I handpicked him out. I had told the Blairs I wanted to follow one of their steers from birth to slaughterhouse. Ed Blair suggested, half-jokingly, that I might as well buy one. Then I could have the whole beef-making experience. He told me how to pick out a good calf, one with a broad, straight back and thick shoulders. Basically, you're looking for a sturdy frame on which to hang a lot of meat. I also wanted a calf with a face I could easily spot in the crowd, so I could easily find him again. I went out to the pen and gazed over the sea of 90 black Angus cattle. Almost at once, steer number 534 moseyed over to the fence and made eye contact with me. He had a wide, stout frame and 3 easy-to-spot white marks on his face. Here was my boy. New home, new diet, page 67. Steer 534 and I traveled from the ranch to the feedlot in separate vehicles, the first week of January. It felt a lot like going from the country to the big city. A feedlot is not a very pleasant city, however. It is crowded and filthy and stinking with open sewers, unpaved roads, and choking air thick with dust. At the center of the feedlot stands the feedmill. That is where 3 meals a day for 37,000 animals are designed and mixed by a computer. 1 million pounds of feed pass through the mill each day. Every hour of every day, a tractor trailer pulls up to the loading dock to deliver another 50 tons of corn. The driver opens a valve in the belly of the truck, and a golden stream of grain begins to flow down a chute into the bowels of the mill. Around to the other side of the building, tanker trucks pump in thousands of gallons of liquefied fat, usually beef fat from a nearby slaughterhouse. There's also the protein supplement, a sticky brown goop made of molasses and urea. Urea is a form of synthetic nitrogen made from natural gas, similar to the fertilizer spread on George Naylor's fields. In a shed attached to the mill sits vats of liquid vitamins. Beside them are 50-pound sacks of antibiotic drugs. Along with alfalfa, hay, and silage, stems and leaves of corn plants, all these ingredients will be automatically blended together to make the feed for cattle. 3 times a day, a parade of dump trucks fills up with this feed and carries it to the cattle pens. Before being put on this strange diet, new arrivals to the feedlot are treated to a few days of fresh, long-stemmed hay. They don't eat on the long ride and can lose up to 100 pounds. The hay gives them a chance to get adjusted. Over the next several weeks, they'll gradually step up to a daily ration of 32 pounds of feed, including 24 pounds of corn. That would be enough corn to fill a paper grocery bag.